Hopefully I won't have to redo this one, which I've had to do in the last few weeks. And so anyway, welcome to the latest edition of Tuesday Pulse. These next 2 weeks are going to be, I think, very useful to a lot of people, depending on how you use AI and how to use it more effectively. Been experimenting with a lot of things. LLMs change weekly. There's a lot of updates, but I think that these foundational ideas are going to be very helpful for you to just make your world of AI better. And so, I'm Chuck Boyce, CB Creative. We're going to talk about prompt engineering, context engineering, two ways to guide your conversations. They're both different, they're complementary, but they have their unique needs and purposes. So, um, why do you want to use either one? You're already using them, whether you realize it or not, and you may not realize you may be doing it wrong, but there's really no right way or wrong way to deal with AI. Most AI training stops at the prompts. I've in previous episodes, if you've participated or looked at any of these previous episodes that I've done, there's a format to a prompt. The more context you give, the better the result. And so this is going to be these issues that I do, these episodes, focus on either the technical aspect or the business aspect. And this is more on the technical. And so next week is more the business implications of how you're using these in your business. And so, um, different people, different results. Two people who use the same AI can use it for the exact same task, and they'll get different results because of how it's worded. Even just changing the wording and putting one verb in front of a noun can just change the entire context. And so the better you are at writing a prompt, the better your results are going to be. And so, like I say, two different people may ask ChatGPT or Claude, write me an email, and get completely different results because of the context that you're putting in. So out of the box, every AI is a blank tool. It doesn't know your industry. It doesn't know your clients, your voice, your constraints, or what is the definition of good. And so every time, unless you customize it, it's going to be a blank screen. Different results, different ideas. And so by default, there's no memory between sessions. And so every time you start a new conversation, whether it's in Gemini, whether it's in Claude, whether it's in ChatGPT, it doesn't know who you are unless you customize it. And so nobody's written down what good output looks like. And so when you ask something of AI and you get a result that says, oh, that doesn't sound like us, that's because you haven't given it enough information to understand how you want it to respond. So again, context is going to be, am I sharing something? So David, are you not seeing sharing? Is anybody else not seeing the share? Okay, so David, I'm not sure what's up with you, but got it. Cool. Awesome. Thanks. Um, yeah, I don't often look at the chats, but I'm glad that I did because in previous episodes it hasn't been shared. And so, anyway, so going back to the tool doesn't know who you are. Every session is from zero, doesn't have the right context. And so, unless you customize it, it's not really a tool problem, it's a context problem. Again, the more information that you give the LLM, the more it's going to understand how you want it to react. And so prompt engineering and context engineering are completely different ideas that you need to be aware of. Prompt engineering is shaping a request. It's about how you ask things. It's clearing, it's formatting, it's revealing your constraints. It's every time you say, depending on what you want it to do, give it a role, give it a context, give it a result, give it an example. The more you provide the LLM, the better the response is going to be. And so if you ask a better question, you're going to get better results. And so if you give someone a briefing document before you meet with them, the conversation is going to be more effective. And so prompts are visible, they're immediate. You type something, you get something back. Context engineering, on the other hand, is how you're shaping the environment. And so if you can create a set standard of how you want the conversation to go, that's where context engineering comes in. And it can reduce the amount of information you put into a prompt. And so they're complementary, but they're different. And context engineering, again, makes it more reliable, more repeatable. So, what prompt engineering actually is. Prompt engineering is creating a input that is very reusable. And in previous episodes, if you've seen these, I've talked about craft, I've talked about create. It's very simple. You just give them clear, specific tasks that you want it to do. Again, give them examples, give them a role, give them the audience. I want to write an email that applies to this HVAC customer that I have, or I want to explain something to a 12-year-old. Just the more information that you can give it, you give it a clear task with a format constraint, write a 3-paragraph email in a professional manner that's warm and not threatening. Every time you add a little bit more, the output is going to be that much better. So role framing, breaking complex tasks into various steps. Instead of writing a proposal, say, here's the 5 key problems this client mentioned. For each one, I want a 1-sentence response, put it in a bulleted format, in a step-by-step format. I mean, you could get really complex, but the more complexity you add, the better output. So give it examples of how you want it to respond. Do you want it in a table? Do you want it in a bulleted output? The more information that you give your LLM, the better it's going to be. And so for one-off tasks, for ad hoc research, for drafting, summarizing, all of these things are with prompt engineering makes a big difference. And so on the other hand, context engineering is actually you write a file and it's just a text file, and LLMs really like structured format. And so a good use is using what's called a markdown file. And a markdown file is just a well-formatted text file. You can use a straight text file, you can use a markdown, you can use a PDF. However, you're giving a description that is reusable. It describes your role, your voice constraints. You give it examples, and it once you put this into a project, which all major platforms have, a container, and many of them refer to them as projects. Projects are in Claude and ChatGPT. In Gemini, they're called gems, but basically you're contextualizing an approach. And so when you build a project and you start adding context to it with a context file, it just makes a huge difference. And so it's like asking a contractor, if you go in and say, What's it going to cost to replace the gutters on my roof? The more information that you can apply to that conversation, the better your answer is going to be. And so um, that's a weird little gap. But anyway, here's how this hurts SMBs specifically. If you give them inconsistent results, every person can have, again, the same tool in the same company. You have Sarah in accounting and you have Sam in operations, and you ask them about client XYZ. They're going to approach it on different understanding of that customer. And so if you can apply a rule that specifies what that customer actually does, what their background is, what their history is, anything about that, you're going to get a more consistent result from Sarah and Sam because the AI is now informed about that brand. And so if you get consistent off-brand output because Sam and Sarah don't have the same ideas, it's because they are looking at it from a different aspect. And so if you can provide that information in a consistent form, it's just going to get a more consistent result across your environment. There's often no audit trails. You can't describe what was sent, why it was sent, what the output was. Everybody has a different response. And so nothing's repeatable because, again, you don't have a consistent format that you want to use. And so if it can't be described, it can't be reviewed, it will make mistakes and you won't be able to catch those. And so here is why you want to use prompt engineering and context engineering. And if you have been to many of these, I talk about the 5 readiness gates. And there's the process gate and the people gate. And in the process gate, it's, do you document what you want it to be a process to happen? I mean, is your customer intake consistent? Is it written down? If it's not written down and everybody in your organization can do the same step repeatedly, it cannot be automated. If, again, using Sarah and Sam as examples, if Sarah in accounting says, here's how I deal with customers, and Sam in operations says, here's how I deal with customers, they're probably going to be completely different. And so if you can document step by step, you can automate it with AI. The people gate is very similar. It's, who is there an owner for the AI? Is there somebody who is looking at these prompts or context files in a consistent manner, maintaining them and making sure that they're up to date? If you have a context file, which I'll get into in a few screens, that describes what your business is, if your business process changes in a month, are you updating the context file related to your business? So somebody has to be responsible for maintaining this. And so as we go a little bit further in, here's where you can start realizing where you need to focus, whether it's prompt engineering or context engineering. And so if it's a multi-person team who does the same type of things, but they may be in a different department and they have a different view, you want to create some context files that creates more continuity in your conversations. Teams adopt to a tool, everybody uses it differently, outputs can be inconsistent, but if you have a context that is repeatable, you have a better output. And so your output needs brand voice or policy, use context engineering first. If it's customer facing, you may do prompt engineering, one-off tasks. Both of them are very good, but documenting is the thing that most SMBs do not do. Prompt engineering is if it's a recurring task, a client facing, it needs to sound consistent. There's a difference between how you want to use either one of them. And so looking at a context file, what goes in, your role, what the company does, your tone and rule. Let's see, I'll go to, here is an example of a context file. About our firm, we're a small business consulting firm in Columbus, Ohio. We're focused on operational readiness. Here is the contact information. Here's our client info. Here's our pricing. So with this as a reference file in a project, you can get a more consistent result because you don't have to repeat this in a prompt every single time. So, where was I? Yeah. Sorry, I just lost my page. Okay. So, give it your description, give it examples of what you want to do, your high level workflow, your information that is not something that can be reusable, like client names, financial data, sensitive records, things like that. You don't want to put those into it, even though in the example I just showed, it had some various approaches to various businesses, again, some pricing, but as long as it's not confidential, something that you don't want to make public, that's the type of stuff that you put in. You don't want to use particular client names, data, financial data, things like that. Make sure that it's just not proprietary information that you want to include in these files. So, what a markdown file is, really simple. You have these little hashtags for a heading, you have double hashtags for subheadings, put a dash in for a bullet point. Very, very easy to understand. Again, here is an example, a header. LLMs like this approach. It doesn't have to be that explicit, but it does help. Going on to the next screen. Projects. Projects are very cool. These are something, if you haven't used them, it's something you really should get into using. Every one of them, sorry, going to Claude for example.
I'm not seeing your screen anymore. We're seeing you. Are you meaning to share screen now?
I am trying to share the
I
screen
see
here.
the screen.
Do you not see that screen?
Yeah,
I
I
see
see
it.
it.
Oh,
I
that's
see
so
it.
weird because I'm seeing you now talking.
Yeah,
Okay.
I see the screen.
Then that's
I
good.
see
That's
it.
fine. I'm
Okay,
glad other people can.
cool. And so maybe because I'm switching screens, but just going to go into Chat GPT, for example. Actually, I'll go to Claude. Claude, projects. When you go into a project, what you can do, I have a bunch of different projects that I have set up for this demo. I have one file associated with it. This is a demo context file, which looks like this. But for this particular project now, anytime I carry on a conversation, it's going to use this file in this context. And so in this context file, it's about our firm. I'm going to be a small business in Columbus, Ohio that deals with HVAC. And so if I were to have a conversation here, I use whisper flow. And so I can just hold down my function key and talk into the computer and it will carry on the conversation. So instead of typing, I just had a conversation with Randy about his HVAC problems, and I need to have a follow-up email. Can you draft a copy? So put that in there, and now it's going to use this. And of course, Claude wants to make sure that it's going to be complete, and so it's going to ask a couple of questions, which is one of the reasons I like Claude, because it does have these follow-up questions. And so reviewed the operational business issues. I want to confirm the next steps and go on with that. And so now, because it knows about my business, it has that context file. I don't know why this phone keeps going crazy. So anyway, Randy will provide the documents. This is asking me more questions than it normally does, but you get the idea, I hope. And I don't want to keep going into that. But with a project, it just allows you to constrain it to a certain subject matter. And so it's the difference between briefing a temp worker every single morning. You just have more context about that issue, that subject, that client, however you want to make each project. And so between Claude, ChatGPT, and Google, they all have their own approaches. So Claude calls them projects. ChatGPT has projects and custom GPTs, which is a common point of confusion. Gemini calls theirs gems. Context files, you can use them. They have custom instructions, persistent context. They're all memory enabled, so they're all very similar. However, they just use their own terminology. Claude, best for voice consistent, structured output. ChatGPT, custom workflows. Gemini, if you're in the Google workspace, better integration. So, depending on which tool you have, each one again, free versions, $20 versions, $100 versions, depending on how often you use them. Very similar concepts, but different results. With ChatGPT, projects are for organizing conversations. Custom GPTs, on the other hand, are completely different. And so, if I go to ChatGPT, here is an example of a custom GPT. I wrote this one 6 months ago. It's probably not as valuable as it was 6 months ago, but you give it a description, you tell it all the instructions that you want to do, you give it some conversation starters, give it some extra knowledge, what capabilities you want to have available, and that is OpenAI's way to use GPTs, how to make it more customizable. But they also have projects, and so you can just start a new project. I have lots of different projects, as you can see. If I want to do LinkedIn posts, I have a bunch of different ideas on how I write LinkedIn. Claude, same thing. You have projects, different projects for LinkedIn, for networking, for client processes. However you want to categorize how you deal with conversations. ChatGPT is a little bit different. Projects for one thing, custom GPTs for more detail. Going to the next screen. Let's see. Gems. Yeah, gems are Google's way of doing it. If you're in the Google environment, gems work within that environment. I don't think that I have an example of how to use a gem, but I don't use that. I'm more of a long-term ChatGPT person, more recently a Claude, and I haven't used gems as much as others, but again, it's in a Gemini Advanced. Um, go into here, go into Gemini, and you have your gem section, similar to projects, similar to custom GPTs. It's Google's terminology. And so, again, depending on which environment you prefer, they all have a similar concept. But they really do improve the output. And so, if you have dealt with any LLM, which I'm sure you have, you can start with very simple things like write a follow-up email. You're going to get very generic content. If you say write a short professional follow-up email after a sales call with a certain tone, you're going to get a much better result. However, if you start adding, you're a business consultant following up on a 30-minute discovery call with a business owner who's serious about AI, write 3 paragraphs, each referencing, and have a clear value reminder. Again, that's going to be a really good email draft. And you may want to iterate on that and add more functionality, more content, or whatever. But again, just adding more context is going to get you a better result. So that is prompt engineering, how you want to use it more effectively. And so with a context file, as I was showing you with Claude in this demo, with having a conversation with Randy about his HVAC issues, with that context file, it actually started asking more questions. And that's one thing I like about Claude, is that it keeps asking for more information, how to make it better. ChatGPT and Gemini are good, but they don't. Claude just tends to, at least the way that I have it configured, makes you dive deeper into what you really want to have happen. Going back in, and so with a context file, you add your identity, you add your name, the role, your company. It has your voice, your tone, who you're writing to, examples. Everybody in your company can use these same context files and get more consistent results. So again, using Sam and Sarah, Sarah in accounting has a different idea of how a customer looks compared to Sam in operations. His idea of how a customer looks, they're completely different. Financial versus operational. But if you have a context file explaining what Randy's HVAC company is all about, you can have Sarah and Sam get more consistent communications, how you want to deal with them. So, in the next 30 to 60 days, depending on how much you practice, you want to pick 3 recurring tasks and just write test prompts for each of them and save them. Don't do 10 tasks, just cut it down to 2 or 3 that you'd use most often to produce consistent results. If you are constantly dealing with a customer support issue, if you're dealing with an operational issue, there are certain tasks that you probably deal with on a daily or weekly basis. And so build your first context file. 200, 300 words, use it in a straight text editor, use Google Doc, Word, however you want to do it. If you want to get more into markdown files and doing some more formatting, that's great. However, it can just be a basic text file. Then test it. Run the same prompt in different versions with different context and see what the results are. Constantly manage and maintain these files, because your business changes, your clients change, the environment changes. If you deal with AI, which you probably have because you're on this call, AI changes on a daily basis. And so if you can have this consistency in a project, in a context file, it's just going to help. And so within 30 days, build a simple context file, test it, modify it, add to it, keep your workflow consistent, build the voice guides, build policy constraints, build and build and build and customize it to your voice. So, week one, write 3 prompts, build a context file, build your about me markdown, 200 words, load it, test it, revise it, add your voice. How do you want to talk? Do you want to use emojis? Do you not want to use contractions? Do you not want to use the dreaded M dash that everybody thinks makes it sound like AI? Put that into the file. Tell it what to do, what not to do. And then more really week four. If you are the owner of the project, you're the point person. But if you have a larger organization, make sure that you know somebody who is going to be your AI expert, somebody who's going to maintain these files, somebody who's going to maintain that voice. It's always going to change, whether you go from chat to Claude to Gemini. Somebody has to understand the differences between them and how you want to create these context files. Because again, once you have these context files, that's going to define the voice of how you want AI to sound. It's just one of those business operational things that you have to do. And so next week, talk more about what not to put, what your data exposure risks are. And when you start using context files, you're going to realize that your LLM thinks harder. It works more. It's going to use more tokens. You're going to have more token cost. Hidden costs. If you realize when you start using things, especially with APIs, you're going to increase the cost of how you use these AIs. They're not cheap. They want you to they market them to make you think that they're inexpensive, but in the long term, they can become very expensive. And you have the potential for context drift because, as I mentioned, your business changes. You may have different ideas of how you run your business. If you don't update these context files, you're going to get context drift. Your business is going to change. Make sure that who's ever maintaining these, keep these files updated. Create an AI usage policy because, as I mentioned in previous weeks, there's new rules and regulations and legalities that you have to be aware of. Every state is now having their own concerns about how they want to protect the consumer. California, Colorado, Kentucky, New York, they all have different rules about how you protect the consumer. And so if you are going across different states, you have to understand how you're utilizing AI, what you're making the customer, your client, aware of, how you use AI. An AI usage policy is extremely important. It's underlooked. It's going to become more important in 2026, going further into the future. There are those governance layers that you need to be aware of. You don't need a lawyer, but it's something that you should be aware of and you should take it into consideration because AI, like an employee, you have to control how it works, how it impacts your business, how it reflects your reputation, your clients. There's a lot of different things. And so AI is just becoming more embedded, and you have to give it those rules and governance like you would give to any employee. tell it what it needs to obey, how it needs to abide, what rules you govern, how your business runs, what rules. You have to start thinking about AI as an employee. Seriously, write these regulations, these documents, these usage policies, because as the regulations change, you may have some fiduciary, some legality, some impact that you're not even considering. And just be aware of that. So, going forward, start with a basic markdown file. It doesn't have to even be in markdown context. Just create some files, create projects, set some regulations, set some guidelines, compare how prompts work differently with that context or not. Do some different tasks. Just test it and see how it impacts how you want your results to happen. Again, give it examples, give it rules, give it guidelines, give it governance, give it like you would an employee. So, again, I have these little simple readiness checks. Check.cb Creative talks about the 5 blind spots, where you want to go. The assessment at CB Creative goes a little deeper. It asks 4 questions to start with about specific projects. But anytime you just want to see where you stand, I have these. And again, you can always just set an appointment with me. So I hope this was helpful. May have been a little more deep. Next week, talk more about the financial impact, the legalities, more into that stuff that most businesses don't think about when you're using AI. And so, that was a lot. I talked a lot today, and so I'm going to stop.